Yeah. So this is a little trick that I found handy, and this is kind of a big part of my workflow, and it's going to seem really stupid, and it's really not a huge deal, to be completely honest, but it does make things really fast and convenient for me. So when I'm in, and again, let me preface this real quick, like, we're talking about live editing live websites on a server. Now, whether that be a staging website or an actual production website, you know, it doesn't really matter either way. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Some of this, a lot of times, is actual production websites, but obviously it is better if you have a staging version of your website. But this would apply either way. But yeah, if you go into settings and you go to and obviously again this is just for PHPStorm, so the workflow would be different for different IDEs. However, I will say that PHPStorm is probably the most commonly used IDE for professional WordPress development in terms of like plugin development and theme development. If you go on YouTube and look up videos on this stuff, you'll find most people using PHPStorm. I don't think I can zoom in any closer on these folders, and I don't know why the resolution on this is so crummy. It's like pixelated, but anyway. Yeah, I just go to key map, and when you type in key map, in the key map, you type in the search box, you can just go to upload, and there's an upload to default server, and there's a way to mess with your default server, and you can't really tell what this says over here because it's just one tiny little character, and it's the tilde character on your keyboard. That's my upload button. And so whenever I'm like changing things and I hit Control S, I literally just hit the tilde button real quick, and it shoots it off to the server, and it's usually pretty fast. Now, you do have to have your FTP settings set up, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But just so you know, that's kind of like, and it doesn't do this by default, just so you know, it sets it to some other wild, like 3 or 4 combination key shortcut or whatever. You have to actually go in here and tell it, like, no, I want it to be just tilde. And whatever tilde is, I don't know what it is by default, but I just override that because obviously I'm not using whatever it is. So yeah, that's my thing, is I'll go in here and I'll say, oh, actually I do need a print R on this because the thing on WP Omaha still isn't working. And so I'll just save in tilde, and then hopefully when my computer feels like being responsive. Sorry, I know this looks like a fancy Surface Pro. It's the bottom of the barrel Surface Pro. We spared no expense here. But yeah, as you can see, upload to Flywheel completed. 1 file transferred. Oh yeah, that brings me to the next point. Thank you, Flywheel, for sponsoring us and giving us free hosting, in case they're watching this video. By the way, I had a very pleasant experience with Flywheel over last night and today. I'm not even being sarcastic. I'm dead serious. I was on there doing some stuff, and some stuff was messed up, and I hit up, anybody ever like contact like the live chat from your hosting company, and you can tell that their name is like Kim or Jane or something like that, but you can tell their real name is not Kim or Jane. Because the way they're talking, they're like, so English is not your first language. But anyway, like, that was not the case last night. So little plug to our sponsor, Flywheel, because that was actually, I'm pretty sure it was the first time I've ever had a live chat with them, and it was a very pleasant experience. I'm pretty sure it was somebody that actually lived here in Omaha that I was sitting here chatting with, and they didn't know whether I was in Omaha or whatever, Amsterdam. They didn't know. Yeah, so anyway, so as you can see, I just clicked tilde, it uploaded the change. Now when we go to this web page, it's going to be print R-ing an array all over our page, so we don't want that to happen. So let's just save and do that real quick, and let's shoot the new version up, and there you go. It's just done. Like, I only done. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I know live reload is cool, and we're using Gulp and live, whatever. Like, you could do all this fancy stuff, but I've got it down to a habit so quick, and it takes like a second. It's really not a big deal to me. Let's go into how you set up FTP on PHPStorm in case anybody's interested in using PHPStorm. Obviously, this is going to be different depending on your IDE, which is a lot of the reason why I don't use Sublime Text anymore, because Sublime Text's like system for setting up FTP, you got to like install an extension, and then like you have to name that. You have to remember the name of the extension and type it in, and then it opens up the settings, and then it's kind of a mess. I like the way this works a lot better. So we can go to Tools, Deployment, and Configuration. And then this opens up this guy. There's another way to get to it too. I'll show you another way, which is a little bit easier. If you've got your remote host tab open over here, which gives me access to the whole file tree of what's going on here, I can just click on this 3 dots and it just opens the same dialog. And then, so this is my, and you can have multiple FTP connections to multiple servers. And so that's why there's more than one here, because our site used to be on iPage, which is where I started it, and then Flywheel came along and said, hey, that sucks, we're going to do you one better. And I was like, oh, thank you. And so now we're connected to Flywheel. So that's kind of how you set it up. Obviously, you know, you put in your FTP or SFTP and username, password, all that stuff, and everything's good to go. And then you can set a default, what is it? Yeah, so any one of these, if I have selected, I can click this button and it'll make it the default. I obviously don't want to change that right now. I want Flywheel to be the default because that's where our production is. And yeah, so as long as like your live server is set to your default, then every time you use that shortcut, it'll just shoot the file when you're done editing it up to your live server in like a second, hopefully, as long as you're on a decent connection, and you're good to go. So that's kind of like my live, sloppy, on the fly, I guess, workflow for editing anything in a WordPress instance, regardless if it's a plugin or a theme or anything like that. It's not, this is like, if I'm just diving in and doing the sloppy edits, this is usually what I'm doing. Now, we'll get into some other more sophisticated situations here in a second, but since we make zero money from, you know, contributing our time to WP Omaha, I don't really put a lot of effort into actually doing this, and so I just do it when I get spare time, and I try to make it as simple as possible with as little moving parts as possible. Any questions about this so far? Like, this should be pretty straightforward to most people, I'm guessing, although some people might be new to development altogether. If you're new, please don't feel afraid to raise your hand just because nobody else is raising their hand. Already got that? FTP. My opinion, this is about as basic as it gets. Cool. All right. That's cool. It's perfectly fine. Oops. Meant to click that. All right. So this is the WP Omaha. Like, it's kind of my work in progress. I've got like a few different custom plugins on here I've been working on, and we won't get into all that, but that's kind of why I have this up and running. The next thing is, so how do we, like, let's say, okay, Rob, I want you to make some custom plugin. Plugins should be deployable everywhere. You know, where does local development come in? That's where we plug Flywheel again. Actually, just so you guys know, all of today was largely sponsored by Flywheel. I was paid a boatload of money, and that's why I'm inundating you guys with all this Flywheel related content. Actually, I just installed Flywheel on this computer today. Sorry about the bright light all of a sudden. So I want you to build me a plugin. What's the best way to do it? Obviously, like spinning up some random website on your server just to build a plugin is not the best way to do things. So that's where local comes in. Can anybody name a way we used to do this kind of thing, like spin up a local WordPress, PHP, MySQL, Apache type server situation before local?
LAMP.
LAMP, XAMPP. Everybody's got a different way of saying it because they use different machines or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. We got another one though?
Scotchbox. Raspberry Pi.
Now you're just being hobbyist. Huh? Vagrant. Okay, cool. Yeah, that one's good. What was the other one? Scotch. What?
Scotchbox that runs on Vagrant.
Okay. All right. Cool. I never went down that rabbit hole. I tried desktop server. Anybody heard of that? That's a thing. And then there was another one. It doesn't matter. Bottom line is you guys should all be using local because it's free and it's better. How many PC users in here? Raise your hands if you're PC. Good, the minority. Awesome. So most of you will be able to run local by Flywheel no problem. The rest of you that use PCs, well, good luck. Hopefully you know how to access your BIOS. Dylan will help you if you need help later. Yeah. So bottom line is just get Flywheel running as fast as possible. This is the, in my opinion, industry standard way of spinning up and managing local WordPress environments so that you can do local development, which is the fastest way to churn through work for obvious reasons. Is it not obvious to anybody? I don't want to like leave anybody in the dust. Is it not obvious why developing locally is better than developing on a server? Raise your hand, anybody. Way too many smart people in here.
Depends on your server needs. I mean, we have a lot of cloud setup stuff. There's a lot of interaction with on web services and backend services. So we have some of our sites we start initially on Vagrant, and then we'll move up to a staging environment in Amazon VPC. We have some deployment scripts that will set up clones of our production environment or staging environment. We'll test it that way. But it depends on how crazy you're getting, I suppose.
Wow. Sounds like you got a lot of stuff animated or automated though,
We have
right?
a lot, yes.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's great. I usually don't have things that automated. I spin up a manual dev site and a manual production site separately. It's none of this WP engine like, or even I don't know if you guys know this, but on Flywheel they do have a way to like automatically spin up a production or a development server or whatever test version of your site and do stuff on there. But yeah, WP engine I think is probably the most popular one for starting that type of trend as far as staging stuff goes. Yeah, so I spun up quickly earlier, like this little demo site. I think I still have it open on here, maybe. I don't know if that's true. Let's close all these tabs. Yes, here we are. So it's just demo site.local. There's the back end, there's the front end. How many people have used local here? Did anybody not notice this trick where you can click on this little tiny arrow right here to like automatically open up the root folder of your site at first? I didn't know that for a long time. Like, remember Dylan, we were like doing that class the other day. We were like, how do you find the folder, or how do we get, it'd be nice if there was something you can click on that would just open the directory. Turns out there is, and it's just so small and like not very obvious that it wasn't obvious to us. So yeah, but you can just click on that little arrow. It's this little thing right here that shows you the directory path, kind of. You can just click on that little circle arrow thing, and that's the aha moment right there. You just go to app and public. Sorry, my allergies have been crazy lately. Here we are in the root of our folder, and now I'm going to open VS Code. Thank you. I really should have like thrown down another $250 and just like gone for the better one. I don't know. I don't recommend going for the bottom of the barrel Surface Pro, just so you guys know. Maybe you don't have to go for the top, but I should have shot like somewhere in the middle instead of just being like, yeah, I've got a really powerful computer at home. I'll just use that if I need to do something very CPU intensive or whatever. Anyway. Cool. So unfortunately in this demo, we're already in the folder, but in the case that we weren't in the folder already and you just open up like VS Code for the first time, in case you don't know this already, which many of you probably do because there's a lot of smart people in here today, you can just grab the public folder and drag and drop it into VS Code and it will open up at the right folder, or you can do it the Stone Age way, which is go to open folder and like navigate through your computer to select the folder, I guess.
So is that directory structure, is that the equivalent of the bare bones hello world of what you have to have for WordPress?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a hello world, but it definitely is like factory right out of the box WordPress. Like no plugins, no. This is, I literally spun it up like an hour and 20 minutes ago.
Right.
And I've done nothing to it.
Start with that. I know that works and I can customize from that.
Yep.
There's no fluff that breaks stuff. Right?
Well, you can easily break stuff in here. Don't get it twisted. You totally can if you don't know what you're doing, or if you're like relatively new to the WordPress like infrastructure, if you will, or the WordPress file tree, I mean, not to get too much into basics here, but then at the same time, I also don't want to like overestimate how much experience everybody here has and not, let you leave here with valuable information. But the general idea here is that you don't want to touch WP includes or WP admin. You basically just never touch those directories at all or any of the files in them, and you just go straight to WP content, and that's kind of where you want to start customizing things. There are a few things in WP, well, in the root folder, I should say, like WP config, and well, that's mostly it actually. WP config is probably the only file that you might want to tinker with in here from time to time. However, I do believe that if you're using local by Flywheel, there's a way to get it into dev mode. So there's a bit of code that you can add in the WP config file to enable dev mode, or WP debug is what it's called, and set it to true in the WP config file. If you're using local by Flywheel, you don't need to do that. You can just go in here and put development mode on, and that will not only disable the varnish caching, but I believe it also sets the WP debug to false, I think, or maybe I'm confusing that with their server. Bottom line is I'll show you the WP config anyway, and I'll show you where you can set. It's not in here by default. That's too bad. It's not in here by default. Okay, well, if it's not in here by default, you can just copy one of these other lines that say define and go down here and paste it and just change WB collate or whatever you copy to WP debug. Oh yeah, you're right. WP. And then you can just set this to true. And what this should do is it should make it so that whenever warning PHP stuff happens or fatal errors happen in PHP, it will spit those lines of errors out on the screen anytime you refresh the page or whatever. And again, you'd want to save this. And so if you want to toggle this, you just toggle it from true to false. There's actually some WP debug like more specific, I don't even know what these are called, like properties of the server that you can define that are more specific. Like you can tell it, well, I want WP debug on, but I want the messages for it to be off. Or I believe there's a way you can tell it to where like, yeah, I want it to be on for the front end, but for the REST API, I don't want it spitting out like PHP errors into the REST API. Like there's a bunch of different subsets of WP debug that you can go in and manually change as well, just so you guys know. But anyway, we'll just take that out for now, although it is usually pretty good to have that on there. From here, it's going to be a lot of just like little tips and tricks and just things I've learned along the way. And then so most of your stuff is going to be in WP content, and then you're going to be looking at plugins or themes. Now, depending on whether you're doing plugin development or you're doing theme development, if you want to start talking about live reload stuff, chances are you're going to want to like do what I'm going to show you here in a little while in your respective folder on what you're working on, so that when you change the files for that one specific thing, it live reloads, and then it won't pay attention to all the other, basically the rest of WordPress. So whether it be a plugin or a theme, it doesn't really matter. I feel like normally this makes more sense for theme development than it does plugin development. However, with that said, I could totally see myself developing a plugin and still using the live reload feature. I don't know. It just depends on how robust of a plugin you're trying to make. But for simple plugins, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to do the live reload features. So yeah, here's the themes folder. I've created a theme called Test 1, and here's my theme with a whole bunch of crazy stuff in it. And I don't know if I want to get into that yet. Let me think for a second. I want to make sure I don't skip over anything.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So I'm noticing that you have the Gulp file and stuff in there, and for the live reload, and sorry if we're jumping ahead, but
A little bit. Go
if
ahead.
you're needing to include any of that compiling stuff for live reload that has to be built into each theme, or is there a way to do that outside of
The theme.
a theme?
That's a great question, and I can't with full confidence tell you that you can do it outside the theme. I just know the only certainty that I have is that every situation that I've seen where they're using live reload, it's done within your respective theme or your child theme, if you will. Like if you're developing a child theme, then you'd want to have all that set up in your child theme along with your Sass files and all that. And I suppose that makes sense. If you're moving your child theme around from one place to the other, then you want it to pay attention to all of the dependencies that you have for that child theme as opposed to the whole website entirely. So I would probably say it makes, not only do I see it done that way more often, it probably makes more sense to do it that way. I know it's a little bit more of a headache to like kind of go through the steps of like setting that up for each like child theme, but hopefully you're not just like spending a bunch of time working on a child theme and then like crumbling up your paper and throwing it in the trash and starting fresh with a new one and then having to go through the process again. So yeah, that's a good question though. I wonder if it's possible. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. If it is possible, I wouldn't be able to tell you all of the things you would need to consider to make it work. Cool. So yeah, I guess since you asked that question, we'll just go ahead and jump right into the theme development here. So what she's referring to is using Gulp to do live reload. I'm not gonna lie, I cheated and I just found something that helped me do this stuff. That thing is called, and I probably still have the tab open here, and if I do, that means I don't have to. Yeah, here we go. This is the guy. So first of all, Ahmad, man, I'm gonna butcher his name. Ahmad, if you're watching, I doubt you're watching this video, but Ahmad Owais, that's how I would say it. Anyway, he's been a huge proponent in how we develop Gutenberg blocks, and he has also been a huge proponent in just making sure that we practice modern development techniques in WordPress. And so he spun up this little GitHub repo that actually, from what I can tell, isn't even necessary to do what you need to do to get this working. I think it's just here to be here. But yeah, I used this. So it's called WP Gulp, and it sets up all your live reloading and stuff for you. And he's got a few steps here, which are all done through NPM, not Git. So why is it on Git? And I don't know. I'm glad it's there though, and that's what I found, and that's what I used. So cool. Thanks for setting that up, Ahmad. But yeah. It's really easy to get going. So all you got to do is make sure you got Node and NPM installed on your computer at version 5.2 or higher. And then you literally just do 3 steps. It's a 3-step process. You npx WP Gulp. It takes a while to do this, just so you know. I'm not going to do this right now because we would all be sitting here having small talk between the time it takes to write the line of code and the thing getting installed. It does take a little while. And then once it's done, it will leave you with, man, they need to have a dark mode on this website, because every time I go between these two things, it's like a huge, like, whatever, right? Like walking out of the movie theater, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're like, oh my God, it's still daytime. Anyway, so after you get done doing that, doing the npx WP Gulp, you're going to be left with this WP Gulp config file. And so you just have to open this guy up, and you go in here, and you, from what I can tell, the only thing you really need to change when you're using local is to just use this project URL to the correct URL. So that's always going to change depending on what you called your project. Let me zoom in case you can't see. It's not very exciting. I just called mine demo site local. Come on. I know you want to zoom in. Please do it. It was the same command earlier. Holy cow. About time for a restart. Okay, cool. Oh, I haven't even typed for like 4 seconds. What's going on here? Okay. Cool. So You just type in your URL that local like creates for you in your host file. Does anybody know how that works? You guys raise your hand if you know actually how that works and you add stuff to your host file. It's a lot of unresponsive people here, but thank you for raising your hand, those who did. It's a huge pain to do that. Thank goodness like local does that for us. I hated doing that because it's always like, where's the stupid host file? How do I write this stuff in there? Huge pain. So I'm glad it does that for us. Anyway, so you just change your project URL, and after that, I mean, unless you've got other, so he's making some assumptions here in the way this is set up. Like it's asking like where your images are and where your vendor files are, your JavaScript files, your CSS files, all that stuff. He's making some assumptions. Probably the most important to note is the assets folder. He's just assuming that you're putting everything in an assets folder. That's not extremely conventional, I would say. I mean, it's not unconventional, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that that's like standard practice. I've gone into many themes that do not have things structured that way. So if you don't structure your themes this way, you will need to go in here and change a few other things to make sure that it's watching the proper folders and files and whatnot, so that when you change them, it automatically live reloads. Yeah. And then that third step, cover your eyes, is the npm start, essentially. Can anybody tell me why it's npx in your thing, but then npm the other stuff? Why is it one and not the other? I don't. Anybody know?
It's a new plugin system for npm to do more fancy stuff.
Is it just so that you don't have to type install?
I think so. Or npm, I know a lot of stuff used to be done through like npm run, so you have like an entry point to run a script. But I think the point of npx is to do that without having to have lots of extra stuff.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I haven't read a ton about it yet.
I feel like it's just so you don't have to type install.
No, it's like we use all like Gatsby CLI, or there's a bunch Angular CLI tools. It's basically a command from your command prompt. npx in front of that makes sure you're not conflicting with a local command. Like I know in my Linux box, there's npm check updates gives you an NCU shortcut. Well, I also have a Linux utility called NCU. So if I type npx in front of it, I know I'm using the npm package I want to.
Okay. I'll accept that as fact. I don't know any better for sure. It just seems very confusing to me that we would use npx up there, but then down here we use npm again. But anyway, that's what it tells you to do, so just do it, npm start. And that fires up the server and does the live watching. Unfortunately, and I don't know if there's a way, there probably is a way to change this, and I just don't know how to because I haven't been using this workflow for very long. But from what I can tell, you do actually have to go to the localhost whatever port in order to get the live reload functionality. You can't just go to the URL that local provides you. That's, sorry. I wish I knew more than that. So I just noticed that's how it works. So I just, instead of hitting that URL, I just copied it, pasted it, changed the URL, and then it's working and we can do live reload stuff. And it tells you so in the top right hand corner. If you watch this thing, it'll show you. I will completely admit that I was trying, right before I came here, I was trying to get it, there it is up there in the top right, see browser sync connected or whatever. Yeah, as long as you see that thing up here in the top right, it's there. I was trying to get it to work differently right before I came here, and I totally screwed up how I had it all set up, so I can't like demo it working right now without spending some time like getting it, I don't know, back to the way I had it before. But I can assure you it does work, because I did get it working earlier. I tried to also get, I got frustrated with the fact that I actually had to like go and like manually create my style.css and my functions.php and put the header. Like I didn't want to manually do all that stuff, so I was like, oh well, there's got to be a way I can start from like some boilerplate template thing. and I found something on NPM that gave me a boilerplate template, but it also gave me a bunch of other Gulp related stuff built into it. And I think right now what's happening is that when I try to do my NPM start, there's like some conflict between what the boilerplate theme is trying to get me to do with Gulp and what the WP Gulp is trying to get me to do. So now when I go into open in terminal in here and I hit npm start, it just gives me a whole bunch of random errors. So before I tried to use the boilerplate theme, everything was working just fine. But then I went and screwed it up by trying to be too fancy. So yeah, if we go in here and type npm start, it's gonna say, things are all screwy. That'd be cool if it just worked this time for some reason, but I doubt that's gonna be the case. Yeah, it's a lot of errors. So yeah, I would need to like completely delete this whole theme folder and start from scratch, and I don't know, it probably wants me to create my own style.css and all this jazz and make my file structure exactly the same way that he has it in this config file here. I didn't have time to do that, so sorry about that, but I can assure you it works. 7:30. Any questions about live reload and the WP Gulp? I mean, I will say that of all the ways that I saw to do the live reload and browser sync and stuff, this was probably the easiest way. So I'd suggest you just do it this way. Yes, go ahead. Good question. Fantastic question. I know you feel really dumb saying that, but don't, please. It just makes it so that whenever we change any given file, it just on that screen. So in this case,
so typically if you're using like a build system like Gulp or any of these other there's a lot of crazy JavaScript packages going into, but you can write that code and then you have to build it, and so you have to run these custom scripts that don't build all of that for you. Whereas if you've got live reload set up, it'll do all that auto building for you.
Whenever you save a file, whenever it detects changes in the
All
file.
that building runs in the background. You open up your browser, hit refresh, everything's ready right there. So
Yeah.
that's
So
kind of just a bit.
basically, in this situation, as long as we are on localhost colon 3000 and we are working from there, then anytime we make a change to any file in our theme or child theme or whatever, it would just we look at the browser, it would refresh without us having to hit refresh or anything, because it would detect the change. And it's not just that either. Also, if you're using precompilers like Sass or Less, or even, I suppose, some JavaScript stuff or whatever, it would also detect. Those precompilers would rebuild automatically because of Gulp, and that would change the files, thus also causing it to refresh there as well. So if you're a Sass or Less user, it's kind of like a better workflow.
So you don't have to hit that 5 all the time.
Right. Yeah. All day, every day. Yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna lie. When I'm doing WordPress stuff, I don't really use Sass or Less that much, even though I know that they're both awesome and I would like to. But just getting that environment set up for me usually is so painstaking, and I know CSS so well that it does not bother me to just write in plain vanilla CSS. I know some of you out there are like cringing and you're like, I love Sass so much. Trust me, I love Sass too, and I think it's fantastic. But I would have to be working on a very big project that I know requires a ton of custom CSS for me to take the time right when I start that project to be like, let me get Sass working. You know, like most of the times that's not the case. Most of the times it's just like I'm just sitting there throwing like 2, 3, 4, 5 CSS rules in at a time, and CSS is already easy, so it's just not worth my time to set all that up. Great question, though. Thank you for asking. Any other questions before we move on? Because I will talk about Gutenberg a little bit before I let Dylan take the stage, since we're not able to well, I don't think you're going to live stream. So we're going to cut the live stream before Dylan. So for those that are on the live stream, if you want to hear Dylan talk, you're going to have to make the trip out here because that's a premium feature of WP Omaha Dev Meetups. No questions? How many people actually develop for Gutenberg right now? So,
Tested it heavily.
Many people don't trust that it's stable enough to do that.
fair, but I'm not sure you have a whole lot of say in the matter. They don't care what you think. It's basically, that train's moving. So you can jump on or stay off or whatever, but there's no calling it back. That's a thing. So, yeah, I'll quickly show you guys how I got into like a pretty good workflow of developing custom Gutenberg blocks. It's not anything revolutionary. Most of the work has been done by my good friend Zach Gordon, and I'll show you like whenever I'm trying to create a new Gutenberg block how I get started into that by using his kind of boilerplates that he already has set up, which already come with Gulp and stuff built in, and I'll automatically do a little bit of live reloading. It doesn't live reload your page, but it does live compile your script. So you do have to still hit F5 in the browser, but all your compiling of the React stuff happens automatically so that when you do hit F5 refresh, like all your changes are all in there. You don't have to redeploy the compiled script into WordPress or anything like that, which is nice. You could go another step and like put the other layer of live reloading on top of that if you wanted to, and I'll totally show you a blog article that tells you how to do that. But I have my own reservations about a good workflow for Gutenberg blocks that I've already done a talk about this year back in January, and I'll touch on that if you guys want for the people that weren't here for that talk. But I basically, the short of it is that if your Gutenberg block has any level of complexity to it that's beyond basic, I don't believe that you should be developing it in Gutenberg, period. I think that you should develop it as a web component using something like Stencil or Lit, and then you should develop it there and then use a custom element in your Gutenberg block and do it that way, because it's a much better workflow for that. But again, that's a whole nother talk. I believe, no, I can't remember. No, I didn't end up publishing that talk on the YouTube channel. We did live stream it, but it's not up there for you to see because I didn't really like how that talk turned out as far as like a permanent video went. But if you're interested in seeing the video anyway, you can DM me and I will send you a link to it, because it is it's up private. So yeah, I did a better talk for AnyJS like a month later, and I've been waiting for Nick Nisi, if you're watching this, get my talk up. I did a much better talk for them that did get recorded, and Nick has been telling me he's going to upload it eventually, and I didn't want to steal his thunder and just take my video and upload it outside of his deal. So I've been hoping he's going to get it up eventually. When he does, I'll put a link up to it somewhere, and you guys can. That talk turned out way better. But yeah, anyway, not to get off on a tangent, but I did anyway. Okay, cool. So Gutenberg blocks. I hate just going to GitHub pages all day, but that's where everything cool is happening these days. So anybody heard of Zach Gordon? Raise your hand. He was one of our main speakers at WordCamp Omaha last year. He was kind enough to grace us with his presence, even though he doesn't live here in Omaha. Actually, let me be more specific. Another plug for Flywheel. Flywheel was gracious enough to pay for his trip to come out here so that he can speak at WordCamp Omaha, and then he also went and spoke specifically to Flywheel. And so without Flywheel, we wouldn't have got to he did a whole workshop. It was 3 hours, 4 hours, something like that, like a 3 or 4 hour long workshop on Gutenberg block development, which was awesome. And we got to hang out with him like at the after party and stuff. Like, he's just a really cool guy. He does yoga, all this stuff. Just a really nice guy. And he's got his own YouTube channel, so you can go find him on YouTube. Anyway, why am I at his personal website? We were looking for his GitHub page. Am I going to have to type GitHub before this? Zach, your GitHub is not popular enough in Google's eyes. Yeah, so look up Zach Gordon on GitHub, and then go to this how-to Gutenberg plugin, I believe. Let me make sure I know what I'm talking about. Yes. Okay, yes, this is the one. So if you're just getting into Gutenberg block development, I'd highly recommend just cloning this guy, and he's got really good instructions on how to get going with this. But essentially, you just npm install after you clone it, obviously, and then npm run dev, and that will basically do everything that you need because the run dev. I mean, basically, it already has Gulp and stuff built in, like all. Is it Gulp or no? It's Babel. Sorry, yeah, it's Babel that's doing all of his transpiling for him, and then he's got a few block types in here. Is this not the right one? I'm starting to second guess myself here. I feel like this, he had like 5 or 6 different block examples in the one that I'm thinking of. This might not be the right one. Where's the other one? Advanced Gutenberg course? No, maybe I'll just go to this one, Gutenberg course. Maybe it's in this one. This is it. This is the one, yeah. There's actually more than 3 or 4. There's a bunch of different examples of different types of Gutenberg blocks. I always just start with the rich text one, and then I make it do whatever from there. And if we go into the documentation on this one, I believe it's the same type of setup though. You clone it, yeah, npm install, npm run dev, and I think it's still just Babel again here. Yeah, it is. So if you don't know what Babel or Gulp or any of these things are, like, don't freak out. It's not a big deal. I don't even really know how they work, to be honest. It's like some crazy like Node.js wizardry that's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, I've never met the wizard in this case. I've only met Zach. I don't know what the heck Babel does, but it's basically just like live transpiling of mostly. What I've found that it's doing here that's helpful is the JSX. So he writes, if we dive into, not to get into Gutenberg block development, the video for that one totally is on our YouTube channel and actually has a ton of views in relation to the rest of the ones on there. So by ton, I mean like over 100. Yeah. But yeah, you'll notice here that he's using JSX. And JSX by default is not like part of the deal in Gutenberg. And so in order to write these parts in JSX, you have to have Babel transpile the JSX into regular ES6 or ES5 or whatever. And so that's kind of what Babel's doing here. But it does make your code a lot cleaner. So yeah, I would start with one of these and literally just do what he says. So that's my workflow for Gutenberg blocks. I'm not going to go through and make a Gutenberg block for you real quick. Again, if you're more interested in this, you can go, well, in the Gutenberg block development talk, I don't talk specifically. I didn't start from this point. I started elsewhere with the Ahmad Awais like boilerplate example. But I like Zach's better personally. No offense, Ahmad. So yeah, if you want to know how this one works, either you need to bug Nick Nisi about getting my video up for AnyJS, the talk that was like 3 months ago, or continue to bug me and I will eventually just upload it to ours because I still have the VOD on this computer right here, and I'll upload it to our YouTube channel just because Nick's taking so long. But in that talk at AnyJS, I did specifically go through this workflow with the JSX and all that. Any questions about that? I know you guys are probably hoping for like some live coding examples. You all would have fallen asleep by now. It takes kind of a long time to go through that, and yeah. Go ahead.
Hey, what is your lay definition of a Gutenberg block? I mean, your lowest level in English.
So a Gutenberg block is basically just any block that you can get registered in Gutenberg, period. So if we go into our dashboard here and we go to posts and we go to whatever the welcome probably post that's in here, hopefully when you spin up WordPress. Come on, slow computer. Man. I mean, it's not a very fast computer by any stretch, but usually it's a little faster than this.
It's OBS.
Yeah, it might be. Well, but I've OBS before though, and it's not usually this slow. I think it's Thursday is what I don't know what it is. It's El Nino. That's what it is. Anyway, so each of these are Gutenberg blocks. So when you go up here and click the plus, like in order for it to get registered up here as a standalone thing that you can click on, that's what makes it a block.
Okay.
And so these are all individual Gutenberg blocks that we can insert into the Gutenberg editor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That is perfect.
I mean, I've made a custom one. I can get into a different WordPress site and show you that custom one
No,
if
I
you
just
want.
need
but-
that high level. That's perfect.
Okay, cool. Any other questions about this workflow so far? I mean, this is meant to be kind of a high-level thing, plus Dylan definitely has some stuff to talk about here, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I did have a few things I wanted to step through as far as workflows, and that's kind of my jam. Like, it's just PHPStorm or Visual Studio Code, either way, depending on whether I'm doing local development or remote development. If I'm doing remote development, I'm 99 times out of 100 using PHPStorm, and then if I'm doing local development, depending on the situation, I'll either be